All right, we're live. Live. Okay, we are calling the Human Resources committee meeting today over there now. Starting with public comment. Do you have any public comment?
We don't have any public comment.
Okay, is there anyone in the crowd that's here?
The big crowd.
First thing we will do is to move to, wait, should that be the December? January 9th? December 9th?
Oh.
January. Can we still?
Is it January 6th? Okay.
I will move to approve the minutes from the January 6th meeting.
Second.
You read them? Yeah, okay, cool. All right, we are back again talking about hiring practices, recruitment and hiring practices. This is not really, I made this really vague and now I'm kind of forgetting totally, but we're going to do two things. One is that we've spoken a lot about the kind of the hiring process within the district and how much of that work was informed by the work of the LIC. And so we have invited Roberta Wallet here today, both from the village. Are you from the village? You're from the village. From the village, and also a lead member of ELIC.
Yes, although EILC
thank you.
doesn't exist anymore.
Right. So we would be really grateful if we could hear from you. We know that there, like, a lot of work went into all of the work that you did, but some of that very much informed the way that the hiring process that is currently in practice here at ICSD, especially as it relates to ensuring that there are like equitable practices happening in terms of the hiring process itself, that candidates are being asked specific questions and asked to write statements that really help to communicate both their understanding of and also like their experience with kind of promoting equitable practices within the classroom. So we were both interested in kind of hearing a little bit about that part of the work that you all did. And then second, we have spoken specifically about within the hiring process about the hiring committees and who sits on those committees, and recently learned that it's the village, that it's kind of the community liaison for putting a community member on the interview committees. So wanted to also hear a little bit about what that process has looked at. We got an email from our fellow board member Karen Yearwood earlier today that helped us understand a little bit more about how she was involved in that work for a long time. So maybe just to be able to share a little bit more, and assuming that practice is still happening, what it looks like. Okay, so that's a lot, I know, but yeah.
Okay, so you want me to begin?
So first, great.
So probably you all know that I was a teacher in the district for a long time. I had 3 children who all went through the Ithaca School District, who I loved dearly and who I wanted to get the best education they possibly could. And because I was already in the system, I actually was able to intervene when I needed to advocate for them. As a teacher, some of the way I entered into this is that I was an elementary teacher. I had children, particularly children of color, who were brilliant and creative and wonderful. And I saw that as they went through the school district, they ended up not graduating. And I saw that as a problem, although I didn't fully understand what the problem was. But all the children I taught were my children, just like my 3 children. And I tended to advocate for them in the same way that I advocated for my children. And I hope as board members, you see yourselves in that same light as advocating for all the children. Because I mean, I think you all have children in the district, is that right? And so you know how you feel about your kids and what they're getting, and do you feel that way about all the children? So something to think about. I first started being involved with the hiring process when Deborah Manning was the affirmative action director. So we're talking about decades ago. And she recruited people to be on the affirmative action committee. And part of that, what we did, those of us who were doing that, was we were trained by her to serve on hiring committees. And specifically to serve on hiring committees to make sure that the process was equitable. And in the book I wrote a whole chapter about the hiring process. If you ever feel inclined to get more history than I'm going to give you tonight. So I'm just going to read a little section. At that time, I remember sitting on hiring committees with other teachers, administrators, and parent reps. We would read over the applications, and then a teacher might say, I think we should hire Sally. She is my friend's daughter, and she would fit right in. And the teacher who made this comment was white, and so was Sally. This pattern of practice carried on for many decades, resulting in replicating the demographic makeup and culture of the district. If there were a candidate of color, some member of the committee might say, we need to hire the most qualified person, implying that a person of color could not be the most qualified. It was always challenging to push against that mindset. And I'm reading this to indicate where we started from. It was like that. That's how it was. Over and over again, hiring people that looked like the people who are serving on the hiring committees. So after the board ended the affirmative action office, the village in Ithaca, which started in around 2000, took over the recruitment and training of folks to serve on hiring committees with the same goals in mind. And at that time, I remember that Micah Plinka-Lair, who was part of the committee I was on in the village, went to Judy Pastel, who was superintendent at the time, and said that the village was going to be doing it. And what Mike was doing was just sending out postings to the village list saying, you know, we need somebody. And I said to him, do you ever find out if anybody actually volunteered for the committee? And he said, no, I don't have time to do that. So I said, how about if I take that over? And so I've been doing it ever since. Although I have not been doing it this year, because after EILC passed away, I just stopped doing it. It just, although. If somebody else would like to take it on, I would be delighted. And so I did trainings with anybody who volunteered. And at the beginning, we called it a community rep because there was a slot in the hiring process to have a community rep. And then that was really confusing because anybody in the community thought that that meant they could be on it, and I would get calls and I would say, well, it's not just anybody can do it, but I would be happy to give you a training if you'd like, so that you can serve on the committee. And that was the last I heard from them, because they really didn't want to do that. They did not want to do it from the perspective of equity. So why does it matter who's on the hiring committees? Right? Because that seems like the question that you're kind of asking. If we don't have people who are intentionally on the committee for the purpose of making sure that we hire teachers who are culturally competent, who are conscious about their own identity and how that impacts how they present as teachers, we are going to just keep replicating the people who don't know how to teach children of color. And I would say that for the children of color in our district, to have somebody in a position of power, as a teacher is, or as any employee of the district is, it tells them that they can do this too. And there actually used to be, we used to have a, can't remember what we called it, be a teacher, be a hero, something like that, where we actually did after school classes for children who thought they might want to be teachers or don't even know they might want to be teachers yet, to inspire them to consider becoming a teacher. And that was a great thing. I mean, I taught that class for a while, and then other people did it. I don't know what happened to it. That's a good question. I think it's equally important for children like my children, my personal children, for all the white children, to have a teacher of color. And I see in my children as they became adults that having had those experiences carried over into their professional lives in ways that never could have otherwise. So it's good for all the children to have a diversity of people standing or sitting in the room with them who are leading their educational work. And it's really important who is sitting in those hiring committees and whether they understand why it's important to either be hiring candidates of color, or because most of the candidates are white, to hire white teachers who get it, who know how to do this. And I had written this piece years ago about what does a teacher who is culturally competent and responsive look like. And I wrote it because it seemed like people didn't quite understand what that meant. And we used this as part of our training. I mean, I wrote my draft of it, and then my friends from Action edited it with me, which made it even better. And unless you have had some kind of training around this, which it seems like maybe the education schools don't do, you might not understand. And I think, given my own life experience, when I came into this, I thought I knew everything. I've been doing this work, and I didn't. I totally didn't. And it's taken a lot of work on my part. I mean, that was why I did a sabbatic and went to UMass to study with Sonia Nieto, who's the queen of multicultural education, because I saw that things were not right here, but I didn't have the language to talk about it. And once I had learned the language, then I could come back and talk about what I saw happening. I taught for a really horrible year at Ithaca High School. After came back from my sabbatic, Judy Pastel would not let me back to Bell Sherman, where I was teaching in a wonderful school that was based on having an anti-racist school community. She wouldn't let me back. She put me at the high school, which I could do because I had an ESL certification by then. And what I saw at the high school was so depressing to me. I don't know if it's any better now than it was then, but it was not about children. And I taught elementary school, so I was about children. In high school, it was about subject matter. Teachers cared about whether they were teaching math or English or whatever, but they didn't care about it. Not 100%. There were some teachers there that cared. But I remember sitting with somebody who was a hall monitor, I guess, that they may still have in the high school, sitting in all the halls. And when somebody would walk by during a time when class was in session, they would ask them, do you have a pass? Where are you going? Whatever. But when the Black kids walked by, nobody stopped them because they were afraid of them. These white teachers were afraid of the Black kids who were their students. Not at all culturally competent, and not at all. And what the message they gave to those students is, we don't care about you. If you're skipping class, we don't care. That's the message. So that, I mean, there are just so many reasons. If you want to know more about it, read my book. I think that it's a loss that we are no longer having people on the committees who come in with the sole purpose of thinking about equity. but there's just so much I can do. I've done my bit, and I'm old and tired. Um,
Can I take over from there?
you have to go?
Yeah. Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah. So, I'm here because Roberta asked me to go and come, and I have like a couple rules that I live by, and one of them is doing whatever Roberta asks me to do.
Will you just for the people watching, just.
Oh, I'm Meryl Pitts. I'm the current executive director at the Village in Ithaca. As Roberta talked about, the village has been around since early 2000s, and I'm actually the only the third ED in that entire tenure. So it was Cal Walker, the amazing Cal Walker, who's still a district employee for the first 8 years. Then Karen Yearwood, who's on the board. I mean, so it's a lot of shoes to fill. And I started in fall 2019, and I met Roberta on my very first day, and there was a very big argument at the EILC subcommittee meeting that you attended. We'll talk about it later. But so EILC, I don't know how much you've talked about EILC at the board, but the Equity and Inclusion Leadership Committee, which also came out around the same time that the village was founded, was really coming out of a time where incredibly overt racism and bias was taking place sort of across the country, across the district.
That's when Judy Pastel was here. It was not good.
And when we really needed people in the room saying things like, you can't only hire teachers who look like you can't hire your best friend's sister, that's sort of the origin of all of that work. It's the same origin of EILC. And I think Les Roberta, who has been saying, I'm not going to do this anymore, and I'm old and tired since I met her 6 years ago, and who's still here on a Tuesday night, was sort of explained to me the history and talked about the village reps. And, what I have sort of noticed the same thing that Roberta has, which is that the village, in terms of appointing community reps, has tried to still be, it has always been the same. It has been to get people in the room who have purely an eye on equity. And so when we are contacted by people, we say, the point is to be a representative to multiple committees in the room with an eye specifically on equity. Please go meet with Dr. Wallet and get a training. That's sort of what happens. But there's a lot of sort of structural barriers to that kind of participation in the process that I think deter people from doing that work. I think there's also, I'm glad to be having this conversation because there's definitely confusion about what that work is, right? So I think, so we did take over, we're trying to send emails, the sort of same model that we talked about, and nobody's available for multiple hours during the workday, unless you have a certain amount of power and privilege, which maybe means you're not who we're looking for, But I also think that it's not been clear to me, at least in my tenure, in this iteration of HR, which has implemented wonderful systemic change, like under Gladira's leadership, and in which the structure of the interviews, hopefully, when done well and done right, do not allow for the type of incidents that Roberta described, and in fact are so closely structured that it's not super clear what stakeholder input means anymore. And so in general, when I work with marginalized folks, youth and families, I never ask someone to sign up for something unless I know I can promise an outcome, right? So especially if someone who is going to take off work or who's going to, put a lot of like emotional time and investment into this type of volunteer labor, I want to be able to like promise that it matters and that I'm not saying that it doesn't at this point, but I'm not super clear that it does. And I also think it would be helpful to know, like, is this something we still think is necessary? What is the difference between participation from an equity lens and just general community participation? What are we looking for from that type of representative? I mean, as like a personal pitch, and I think that I've been sort of suggesting for quite some time, is I would actually rather seeing student representation on the hiring committees. I'd like them to be excused from their classes and get credit for their time and have it count as something, because I think that they know way more.
ICSD does that.
They do. They have a student representative. Yes. So I think there's definitely, this is a great time to revisit what this looks like and to ask people, do we think community participation is important? Do we think equity-driven participation is important? How is it different? How is it similar? how are stakeholders assured that it matters that they take 2 days off of work and come do this? Or if we really are valuing stakeholder, how can we shift our hiring participation? What are our goals? I do also think that, I know Gladira has talked about this too, is that when you're recruiting candidates, particularly candidates of color coming from larger cities that have much larger populations of color, and you're trying to sell them on moving to Ithaca, New York, it can be helpful to not sit in a room full of white interviewers. So is that our goal? Like, I think I have a lot of questions. I think Roberta and our original village and EILC have done systemic work that is just beautiful and shocking and admirable. And if you look at our equity report cards, we're a lot of our kids are experiencing the same inequities. It's just different inequity, and it's not any less racist. It's just differently racist.
I tried looking up on the latest report card, but I couldn't find it. What the current proportion of students of color and staff of color. And when I wrote the book, which was a while ago now, it was 35% students of color and 5% staff of color. But I don't know if that's changed any, because I just couldn't find it. And I actually sent Lynn an email asking her, and she didn't get back to me, so I don't know.
Well, and that's a conversation we've had at the village around the equity report, is how does that data get reported? Is self-reported data good enough data to share? What are the privacy concerns around asking staff to self-report racial demographics? So I think there's so many layers of this entire conversation, but it's a good one to be having. I also, and I wasn't here for the entire time students were here, but it's so interesting to hear Roberta talk about the Black and brown children being ignored by the hall monitors when all of our Black and brown children are currently talking about just being over policed in the hall. So it's like we're not better, we're just different. So maybe if we think about a way to do things differently, maybe we can see some change. And we're here to help if you want, I think. Right?
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I just hearing it made me realize that I didn't even understand the purpose of the community representative that you were helping to appoint to these committees in the first place. I did not understand, because I had no idea that it was like an equity focused
That was not
role.
very clear.
That's why we were asking. I think the question first came up because we were like it sounded like it was just like anyone from the community, and it just happened to be being filtered through you all.
That's what brought the question up, because
Right.
they said, if it's a community rep, why is it coming from one organization?
Yes.
And that was unclear.
Yeah, we changed the name to Village Rep at some
Okay.
point because it was clearly confusing.
That's helpful. Yeah, so that makes a ton of sense, and I wasn't thinking about it that way, so I have lots of questions, and I'm sure are not gonna come to me
Well,
right
it's a
now.
shame Jacob isn't here because I watched the last meeting and he clearly was also uninformed about a lot. Although I do remember when
He's
his father
listening,
was
though.
on the school.
He's listening in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's very helpful to understand. And I also know that Gladira you do your own kind of training with everyone who's going to be interviewing. So I think that there's more to learn about how those trainings differ are the same.
Gladira's training is great. I mean, that I think in some ways you cover.
Yeah, I cover a lot about bias and, putting equity at focus.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, I've been through that training. So yeah, that'll give us a whole different frame of thinking about, and I think the questions are really valid about, is this even the right?
And there are people who are. I'm on this listserv for next door,
Oh, God.
people are so uninformed
Yeah.
and so racist.
Yeah.
And hostile toward all kinds of things around the district. But they don't understand, and there are probably people who don't think we should be diversifying our workforce. You know, who are, yeah. So it's just really important to maintain. And at this point, you know, one of the things that EILC used to do is when there would be new hires of color, we would, you know, I can remember taking somebody around town and telling them, this is where this school is, and bringing them inside and introducing them to people at GIAC and at Southside, that it's not easy to come to Ithaca as a person of color, as I'm sure people can verify for me. And so what are we doing to retain? And so I don't know, I mean, I'm sure you're doing whatever you can do.
I think that leads me to a point I wanted to make too, which is that, you know, this is the HR committee and I'm thrilled to be here. And I think that the stakeholder piece is just such a small piece of how to ensure equitable treatment of all of the people in our system. And I'm not sure, like, if I had to pick one to be putting my energy to, like, if we're focusing on this piece, I would also be like to know about like future accountability for hired staff and future accountability around retention. And like, it can't just be one slice of it. It has to be all of it. And I know you meet for an hour twice a month, right? Once a month, cool. So get right on that, everybody. But I do think it's not a question to look at in a vacuum. I think it's part of a whole package. And I don't like to be part of any initiative with like the village in the name that I don't feel like we're doing super well. And like right now, I cannot recruit village representations to serve on board like hiring committees in the middle of the day. You know, it's just not possible. But I'd like to do better if it's a thing that is valued and important and we see as part of a larger implementation. Yes, Jen.
Meryl, to your point, and also Roberta, thank you, and I love your water bottle. Like you're talking about kids and it's just like, it's awesome.
Yes, this is my daughter gave to me when my grandson was born.
It's perfection.
Yeah.
So first off, I cannot thank you both enough, but thank you for the history and just, this is amazing. And I'm just sitting here thinking about, one, I wanna like pull you aside and just talk to you about like what you've seen, and
I would be glad to get together with you sometime.
it would be amazing. I think we've been saying that for years, but
Yeah.
Also, the book's available on Amazon. You can
I was
buy it
gonna
right
say,
now.
well, I'm gonna make sure there's an audio copy, cause I can't.
It's on Kindle.
There we go. Okay, anyway. I'm like so curious, you know, and I wanna say this not as something I believe, but like you're talking about what's on next door. You know, just the whole idea when you set affirmative action and being the age I am and hearing people over the years say, oh, we don't need that anymore. And Meryl, to what you just said, when you're talking about future accountability for hiring and retention and all these things, and us only being here, you know, once as a board though, I'm curious, we have you here. And we're talking about all the work that Gladir is doing. I would love your input on policies or things that we can do as a board to improve upon this that are embedded in what we do as a district, so we're not back at this place. So yeah, we can't make things happen right away, but what are things we should be starting to consider based on your vast like history and knowledge and watching everything work to both maintain but also improve and embed a way to do this into the work that we do. So when Gladiris moves on or Zach moves on or whatever, and I agree, like people do not have the time or energy to volunteer. So what
Students
can
do.
we embed?
I'm
like
telling
that
you, I think like student voice and not, you know, student voice coming from a place of lived experience with inequity is an easy solution. I don't know if there's some bar to, I don't see why not, because it's not like, I don't know, but they're available during the day, you know where they are, and they know what they need. And I think that the training, early years training is great, Roberta's training is great, double training, our kids are smart. I mean, I would love to put student village reps on hiring committees, especially if they were valued for their time and input, as long as they feel like they're there for a reason and they're being heard, you
Well,
know?
not only that, but to me, that's something that could go for, you know, you think about college applications or job applications, like that is right there and there, you help them build a resume.
Yes.
And that goes right on it.
And that's, I
Amazing.
think, you know, Esther, who was here in the previous meeting, says something I love so much, where she's always like, building a relationship with me makes your job easier. So like, kids can see like, oh, this is a person who I'm going to want to connect with, and I am going to make their job easier because I was in their hiring committee and I remember what they said, and we have already begun building a relationship, you know? Yeah, that'd be cool. Students on the hiring committee.
And I should know this, and maybe I could look it up and ask in general, like Ladira, your trainings that you do, is that something that is part of the systems of HR? Like, I think about like standard operating and institutional knowledge that is passed on if you were to like say, oh my God, I got a job opportunity somewhere, please don't, but you know, like, is that embedded? Is this something that is stuck with us and not just person to person?
Yeah, so we offer that once a month. And all of our employees can, either, if they're an employee, they can enroll on our frontline professional development. I currently have slides that go through the process. And it's a requirement in order to be on a hiring committee. So it is very, you know, embedded. I mean,
But it's not just for staff, it's for.
and for everyone,
Yeah.
yes.
But it,
Yeah,
yeah,
so
it
staff-
exists on Gladira's computer and could be implemented by someone else who comes and takes. And I think I've been to it like 3 times, so it is pretty
Yeah,
consistent.
the next thing we were thinking of was actually making it a like a vector training where you can go in, there's a questionnaires and do like a voiceover, so then it's there. And then it just needs to be improved, you know, the language improved.
And I have, sorry, one other question while all these brilliant minds are here. Because something that comes up in a lot of our meetings is the idea that our interview and application process, some of the questions in there might be a hindrance to someone applying. I know Jacob says this a lot, I can't remember specifically what it is, but is it an essay or something? And I would love to have your input based, especially Roberta, based on the rich history you have on
So the questions on the application is something I was involved in creating. So obviously, you know, I have a bias. But they are really important to me as somebody looking through my lens in being able to determine whether somebody is has potential, even if they don't know it all yet, because a lot of young people coming out of college don't get it. But if they can answer that question in a way that shows that they think about this, that they care about it, that they might have had life experiences that impact their whatever. But I would also say, I mean, I have read thousands of applications probably. There are a very small number that really answer it well. And when somebody does, I go, whoa, we want to hire this person tomorrow. Because they clearly get it. And so the questions are important for that purpose, for being able to die. I think the questions are also important for the applicants to say, oh, this is something Ithaca cares about. I don't wanna apply for a job here, and if that's the case, don't apply. You know, it might scare some people away, and if it does, they shouldn't be here. That's what I think. And I think the whole hiring scene right now is not good. Right? There are just not as many people coming out of school, and I've been telling Ladira she should target, somehow find all these people who are getting fired because they read a banned book in their class.
Yeah.
Right? That, we want you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't exactly know how to do that. I was because but if they're in Florida, which is really the last place in the world I would ever want to teach, would they want to come to Ithaca? You know?
I do have a thought based on your question, and I agree. I mean, I love the questions. I think they're important. I think also they're currently optional still, is that right? Or are they like
They're-
red starred?
They're mandatory.
They're mandatory, okay. Because I do think that it's not so much about whether your answer is perfect, it's about the intention behind your answer. I do think that Gladiator is gonna kill me, but I would be interested in an option of like an alternative show what you know for people who communicate better in different ways and maybe have a hard time, and you know, particularly candidates of color who have to answer the sort of like diversity questions, and like how do you subtly say, hey guys, like this is my life, you know? So I think it'd be interesting if there were maybe an alternative rather than to the essay questions about like submitting a personal video or a, you know, whatever. I'm just, you know, I mean, I like different methods of communication being available to people depending on their learning styles, as does my friend Erin. So I think that's
Good
I
idea.
love that idea,
Wouldn't that be
because that's very, very, that targets young folks, and you
Yeah.
get to see how they can. Yeah.
Well, and I think, you know, we at the village hire a lot of people with experience in the issues we combat. So with racism, with homelessness, in particular. And that can be really hard to answer those questions without separating yourself. And you don't know from an overwhelming list of questions whether you are supposed to be talking about yourself personally, whether you're not, whether it's like not professional to be talking about yourself. So I think like a really clear invitation to be like, if you'd like to share,
One
if
of
you'd
the
like to answer these
questions
differently,
is-
it's about your personal experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know. The kids, they love their voice notes.
No, you're just thinking about how actors now, like, you know,
Like
they
a reel?
audition with their cameras.
Yes.
Like, why not allow that on an application process? We were talking about
I
that.
kind of like that. I just came actually from one of our tech committees, and we have the AI committee coming up, and this will connect, I promise. One of the things I wonder is with the prevalence of like AI writing tools, it is likely that folks are going to just get a prompt, put it in, have it written for them. So when we have conversations with teachers about instruction in the classroom and they voice similar concerns, one of the things I say is, we might have to look at how we can assess learning differently or assess experience differently. And you know, obviously our interview is going to give us one window, but a video or audio message could also do something similar. Now, there's still the same perhaps concerns about AI and different uses, but different avenues can give us mechanisms to assess candidates. So, worth thinking for sure.
You know, the part of the thing is, once you hire somebody, they need to be mentored. And that has not always been good. It has not always been done in a way that helps people when they are struggling with this. And you know, I mean, when Dr. Holly used to do the staff development stuff, And he was always a great teacher. But then when people started trying to be the kind of teacher he was teaching for, they didn't quite know how to do it if it wasn't natural to them. And I kind of remember kids saying, what's she doing all of a sudden, you know?
I think that that's a really important point, and I think that part of what I'm thinking about when we're tackling this, and to your point, Meryl, that it's like, it's not just like one piece, it's like the whole thing. And so in the little bit that we're thinking about, it's like, how do we recruit the candidates that we hope will work in ICSD, both by promoting it in the right way, sharing like who we really are. Like, I want people to like self-select out as much as they can, as opposed to like us having to like, you know, really dig in there and see like, what am I really hearing now? Especially because not everybody has the training on the other side to even like you said, Roberta, like thoughtfully see what their intentions were on writing that prompt. Like, I don't know that everybody would even know how to identify that, who needed to kind of read that statement. And so I think that what I would love to see is both like on the front end opportunities to really promote the district in a way that talks about how unique it is and what being able to teach in this district, why it is so very different from a lot of other districts. So that people either say, totally is not in line with my philosophy, or, oh my God, I would never, like, this is like a dream come true. And so being able to say that off the bat. And then the reason that we were like talking about that statement is because I have those same, I worry that people like more well-educated people who have been trained on how to write really eloquently are going to write something even if they don't mean a word that they say, or they'll use AI, or they're like, I think that it's like a leading enough that you're like, okay, they want me to say X, Y, Z, so I'll just say that. So there's like the piece beforehand of like, come to us if you've really seen like who we are and are still attracted to this. Then here's the hiring process where it limits the number of barriers that are gonna like just, you know, reduce the chances of you going through, whether it's, oh gosh, I need to submit video. Well, I don't have to for this school district, but I do for this. I guess I'll apply to them. Or do I need to write a personal, whatever. But then making sure that the people that are interviewing have like the best, strongest questions that are, and allow an interview process that's going to really allow the interviewee to be able to kind of like speak and share their experiences so that you can hear it in that moment. And then there's the piece about the mentorship afterwards and the professional development, so that by the end of that first year, if not before that, they're like, oh, this is either definitely not like the place that I need to be, or wow, I've really been integrated into the system and have been allowed to see all of the things that like make it so wonderful. So just so that you know, like why we're starting to think about these different things, it's not because there's any piece that's like we want to get rid of, but more about like how can we communicate and capture all the pieces in a way that we're still identifying the things that are most important in candidates and doing it in a kind of more in a way that's going to allow us to hire and see and hire as many people as we can, but we have so few candidates right now, period.
Right,
So
I mean, that's part of the problem.
yeah,
Is that, I mean, I can remember being part of hiring committees and having some administrators say, we just need a warm body in the room at this point.
yeah, that's definitely happening, like, I mean, across the country with
Yeah,
teaching, which is why, I mean, it's
so
kind of a joke about Florida.
the other thing that we used to do was have a grow your own, that there were people who were working in the district as, you know, aides or whatever. And how can we help them to get their teaching certificate?
Yeah.
And I felt like the district could do more to support people's tuition, for example. Because if you're talking about people who have aid positions, they don't make all that much money to be able to put out. There are a lot of things that could be done, and I actually worked with a couple of those people who then became teachers. And we had for a short while, we had the Ben Nichols Fund, where we provided money, financial assistance to people for books and all miscellaneous stuff. So, you know, it's, there's a lot of things that could be done, but it depends on how much energy people have to put into it.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the demographics are anymore. I mean, there used to be a lot more people of color working at as aides or teaching assistants or whatever than teachers of color. And so to me, it seemed like a really perfect place to go. I also worked with a couple of people who never took the leap.
Yeah.
Because it felt like too much for them to do. And again, you know, going back to the grow our own. We could be doing things with starting with students. And I think that LaBelle has done some of that, really, right?
We did start a aspiring educator.
Yeah.
Program, yes.
Yeah.
And we have had a few people take advantage of the ESP in the educator support professionals contract. There's tuition reimbursement for 50% of the tuition. And there have been some of our current teachers that have benefited from doing that, taking that tuition reimbursement, and also when they're in their student teaching, they can also be paid during their student teaching time. So we have, and it's just getting the word out there. We recently just started the ESP mentor program to help ESPs, new ESPs be successful in their education support professional role, but also once they've gotten their grounding in that, then okay, here's other things you can look at. Here's how you can get your teaching assistant certification. So
Right.
We're thinking in line of that, of supporting education support professionals in that way as well, yeah, so.
And then
Okay. Oh,
I
sorry.
say one super quick thing,
Yep.
yeah, which is that's another way that the village has been really traditionally involved with hiring, is to try to recruit people for ESP positions. And I will say that can be really challenging because the financial barrier is really tough, and it's really hard to be a successful professional if like you can't afford to get to work regularly because you don't have transportation. Like you certainly can't cover the other 50% of the tuition. And perhaps the teacher in the classroom doesn't treat you with respect, or, you know, I mean, there's just, we've actually recruited quite a few former ICSD students to become ESPs, and almost none of them last for a variety of different reasons.
Yeah.
And there's there's a lot of reasons for that they could talk to you about. And you know, ESPs who would be incredible teachers if we could get them there, and we definitely lose them pretty early.
Yeah, thank you for sure.
Yeah, which is what we started that mentor program, hoping it just launched just recently, so hoping that for retention and also to help, you know, get that grow our own as well back in motion.
It's really challenging. I mean, this is what the entire early childhood field is trying to do. They're like forcing people to go back and get their bachelor's and then sort of helping supplement some of that.
We do also pay fingerprinting costs if people need that, right? Yeah. Just
Great.
so, okay.
All right, well, second time in a row, we've had such fruitful conversations that I haven't gotten to the majority of the things on the agenda. And Mary, I'm sorry that I hope you were gonna be here anyway.
Yeah, it's good here.
Sorry.
Yeah, don't.
A huge thank you to both of you for coming and engaging in the conversation. Do you wanna like hold your book up for the camera?
Classroom teacher to co-whisper.
Amazon.com.
Everybody.
Buy it right now. I'm quitting, I'm just gonna pop her around to be her hype girl.
Well, thank you genuinely. I think it's really helpful and lots of information that we didn't totally have, and I think will help to continue the conversation. And as I said to your reps, do you call the students reps too, or your board members? Your students. The kids, you know, we hope that this will just be the start of the conversation, and it sounds like you already have lots of ideas that we could hear many, many more of, and as we're thinking about kind of how to approach this, and as you know, we meet once a month and are trying to do something. I wanna like walk away at the end of this year feeling like something happened. So hope to continue the conversation and certainly welcome thoughts and feedback as we go on. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you all. Meeting adjourned.